Welcome everyone to the Change Starts Here podcast. I'm your host, Dustin Odom, and on today's podcast, we welcome Dr. AJ Lee. She's a leadership and culture consultant, and her mission is focused on helping people identify and own their own strengths, to lead well, and to grow their impact. She is so easy to talk to. She is inspiring to talk to. She's a former D1 gymnast, so I do take a left turn and spend a little bit of time there because being a Division I gymnast is just short of being an Olympic athlete. And so she's incredible in her own right. But also, we dive into what our passion's about. We talk about, we're going to dive into how do we create a culture that encourages wellness for everyone? How do we, what strategies does she have to help us work on our own self-wellness? A lot of us are experiencing burnout right now. And so what advice does she have for us, as well as for working on our own burnout if we have it, or helping others fight through theirs? It's a really interesting conversation. Again, we take a little bit of a left turn to dive into her athletic background, which I find fascinating, but we definitely spend plenty of time diving into real strategies to help us become better leaders and better people. So I know this is a great conversation. Thanks for joining us. Again, if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe to our podcast at whatever channel you listen to. We thank you for your support. Enjoy. Tell us, who are you and what do you love about what you do?
Yes, it's such a important question to ask, and I think it's something I'm still growing into, but how I define myself from a professional lens is I'm a leadership and culture consultant. I support leaders in helping build effective well-being habits. And then I also am really passionate about building strategic brands and their stories for organizations. So I've dabbled in a lot of different areas, from learning and development, collegiate athletics, and then more consulting more recently. But most importantly, right, I'm just passionate about helping others at whatever stage of life they are become their best self. So I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, all of those things, mentor, but especially a student. I truly believe the mantra that we are all lifelong learners. So I think that in some ways is why I've dabbled in so many different things, because my curiosity peaks in different ways. So
yeah, I think one of the things you just said is, you know, I'm a wife, I'm a sister, I'm a friend. I find in almost any job, we can create environments where we require people to separate those. And I feel like the organizations I want to be a part of, you know, understand that all of those parts, including my job, are just a part of me all the time. Right. Is that something that resonates with you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As someone that grew up being defined by the sport that I participated in, it was really challenging for me graduating college, separating, the two. I was always known for that, and really finding out who is AJ, separate from what I'd accomplished and done prior to that. So being able to have a safe space, if you will, to be your whole self, I think is what we're all just longing for.
Yeah. So I think, some people will definitely know your background. For those who don't, it's probably gonna be a little uncomfortable given how humble you are. Can you just share a little bit about what your athletic endeavors were in college that helped you get so well known?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a college Division I gymnast for Auburn University, and competed all 4 years, had the pleasure of just being at this is the one step down from Olympics for gymnasts, right? And have just such amazing memories and experiences through that. It really gave me a heart to just build community through the relationships I was able to build, but also to understand how to manage my time more effectively, because being a student athlete, no matter what perspective you have on that phrase, student really does come first. So being able to manage what it looks like to keep up with my academics and do well in those while traveling. Sometimes we traveled on Wednesday or Thursdays to drive up to Arkansas or wherever for competition was definitely stretching, but something that I'm so thankful for.
So am I right? One of my good friends that I grew up with from fourth grade on, she was a world-class gymnast until probably sophomore year, and she chose to focus the rest of her high school and college career playing basketball. But she was getting up, I want to say even as young as like elementary school when we would hang out, she would be up at 5 a.m. at the gym for doing gymnastics. Was that your childhood growing up? And did that bleed into college to where you're up at 4 and going to grind, and then after school going back to grind?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know specifically about your friend. She might have been homeschooled as well in some regards, or like you said, getting up to do morning conditioning. So it really depended on your club. But for me, yes, 25 hours a week. Got out of school in high school at 2:30, was at the gym by 3, all the way till 8:30, basically every day of the week. We had volunteer practices on Wednesday. So they weren't part of those 25, but we could come. And then of course, 8 to 1, pretty much every Saturday. So when you think of a childhood, right, and what that looks like, my gym friends were my friends. I had several peers in class that I was able to build relationships with, but there's something about the people you see and do life with every day that just really creates your paradigm, if you will, of what you believe is a norm and what you should be leaning into.
When did you know that you loved it so much that you wanted to dedicate all the time to becoming a world-class gymnast?
Ooh, that's a great question. I mean, I think pretty young, my coaches had observed that I had talent or skill set that I could that could be cultivated in different ways. I, as most gymnasts or anyone you talk to, right, especially around the 96 Olympics time, you wanted to be an Olympian. So that was my original ambition, was I want by like 7, 8, I want to go to the Olympics one day. But I realized that there were other avenues to continue in the sport that I loved. I'm tall for a gymnast. I know that sounds really weird. I thought I was tall growing up. I'm 5'3.5", and all my friends were 4'11" and 5 foot. So I was like, man, I might outgrow this sport, by the time I get in later on in life. So all those things were factors that I considered in terms of choosing to go, kind of the college route, and have fun, if you will.
That's awesome. So again, I was an aspiring Division I basketball player. Aspiring meaning like is more of a towel boy, but for whatever reason, when I was working towards that, I never stopped to think. I'm 6'1", not very athletic. Like I don't know if I have the actual like measurements to do that. I would never think 5'3" would preclude you from being able to be like the most effective gymnast. That's I've never thought about what's the ideal height. Like basketball players, you'd like to be 6'5" and above, and that's a really good frame to start with.
Right.
Don't have to be, but that's the frame. To your point, 4'11" may be more of the the better frame there, huh?
Right. Yeah. Well, because the equipment, like on the bars, they can only stretch so wide, and there's the Federation of International Gymnastics, the FIG code, so they don't adjust the bar settings when you get to the elite level. So. Yep. Certain things like that, you consider, and that's why you see so many very petite gymnasts as well.
So when you think about your life as a professional right now, what disciplines did you take from committing so much of your life to being a gymnast? Like what have you learned from that stage of your life that has made you really effective today?
Yeah. I think that the foundation is that there is continual improvement that's necessary to achieve what we desire to achieve. So the reality is that a perfect 10 is fleeting, especially, in middle school, high school, but in college as well. You might have received a 10, but there's always something you could have done better. So that grittiness, if you will, that ability to persevere, even to get that 1% better, is something that I definitely keep with me. And I believe it's helped me be creative in how I approach my day-to-day now. I would say within that, the kind of perfectionism thought process can be a double-edged sword, right? So it can also create anxiety and overcomplicating things and not allowing yourself grace. So I think that as I've matured, I've realized that I can take those things that benefited me, but also realize that we're all human, right? And maybe even some things that my coaches didn't let go in the past, I can let go because of who I desire to be. And it's okay, right? To not do everything the exact way you expect every single time. So
well, that's what I was going to ask. I'm glad you hit on it, was that So I think, I think about gymnasts, like there's so much grittiness that you have to develop over time.
Yeah.
I think, as you said, the double-edged sword there would be too much perfectionist. Like, watching the Olympics, I don't know much about gymnastics, but you make one misstep, that could be the difference between gold and obscurity, which is crazy to
Right.
think. And so I wonder what's that battle has been like for you of how have you learned to give yourself grace? Because at least in the community I'm in and the educators that I used to oversee, I want them to fail forward. So I don't want them to keep repeating mistakes, but I don't want them to be scared of failure because we're trying to love and serve kids and love and serve our adults really well.
Right. No, that's really a great question. And I want to preface it with the reality that I'm growing in it.
Yeah, that's great.
I don't think we ever will arrive. But I think I try to just set more clear boundaries with myself, but also with others, having the courage to speak up for my own needs. In situations when have that coach, gymnast, or even supervisor, student, leader, whatever relationship, it's easy to fall into a pattern of assuming you have to just follow through with exactly what they want of you.
Yep.
And you have to adjust how you're doing something solely to meet their needs without considering your own needs also. So I think it's reframing the thought process for me to understand that it's okay that I have needs also. And as I identify them, it's okay to share them. Because in essence, just like you're talking about with those that you're managing, you want that trust to be built in a way where if they're struggling and you can empower them with resources, with tools, with a suggested, afternoon off, whatever that is, so that they can get to where you guys want to go together. But I think a lot of times, I know for me, I've taken the backpack with all the rocks in it myself, and I've been like, I'm going to get up the hill. And people don't even know that I'm struggling because I haven't been vulnerable or open or honest about those because of that expectation of having things right all the time. So,
well, I appreciate you being honest about your own personal struggle, right? I think the goal of this podcast is to talk about that life's full of ups and downs and missteps. And so change starts here is recognizing what your strengths and weaknesses are, not so that you can be perfect, but so that you're aware of them, so that when you get back into the mode that, the perfectionist mindset, you can recognize it quicker and get out of it quicker, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. So one of the things as I looked at your background that I was fascinated with was you spending time and researching student athlete engagement. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were looking for and what you learned?
Yeah, absolutely. And my passion is athletics, as we've been discussing, and within that, learning and building relationships. So my research was focused on student athlete engagement compared to the general student population. There's this thought pattern in existence for those that aren't operating in collegiate athletics that athletes are entitled, they're not engaged in their work, they're self-seeking, all of those things, right? But it's a narrative that is very small compared to the work and effort that the collective groups of student athletes go through. So I delineated 3 groups using the NSSE, which is the National Survey of Student Engagement. It's a longstanding survey with empirical research based out of Indianapolis. And I used that secondary data to pull out student athletes that were in quote unquote high profile sports. So football, men's basketball, and then I did include baseball, then student athletes in all the other sports that were listed, and then the general student population, and looked at freshmen as well as senior student athletes, comparing their engagement with faculty and staff on campus based on their, responsiveness, comparing their overall learning experience, how they rated those things. And it was interesting. As it was kind of like a first step. I would love to do more like focus group research related to building off of, my dissertation research, but interesting how engaged freshmen were with their faculty, with their learning experiences compared to the senior population. And then also noticing that there wasn't a huge discrepancy across the board in terms of their ability to lean in, to want to learn and grow more while they were on campus. So it wasn't like this huge divide where student athletes are getting handouts and everyone else is grinding it out, right? So I just thought that that was interesting because my goal is to make sure that the broader population knows the reality of what it takes to be a student athlete. Like I have teammates that are, leaders in marketing firms. I have an eye surgeon, like all of those types of people are student athletes too. It's not just that 0.5%, that you see on TV. So
Yeah, I thought the NCAA did a good job of an ad campaign about that, of showing all the different athletes, like all the things that they're doing after college versus just they went pro. And well, I think the tagline was like they go pro and something else other than their sport.
Something other than sports. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I thought that was fascinating because to your point, like I feel like there's so much there. But the other thing that you just pointed out was the grind of, that's my word today, apparently, the grind of being a college athlete is real. And it's nonstop. It's definitely not a free pass. So you got your PhD in higher ed administration. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
What did you think you were going to do with your life at that point? Solve student engagement, student athlete engagement everywhere? What was your focus at that when you got your PhD?
Yeah, in essence, my focus was to become a Division I director of athletics. So I was supporting as the executive support for the AD at the university I was located in. I was helping to support the development of a leadership development program for our freshmen and transfer student athletes with an emerging leader group of upperclassmen leaders, supporting stakeholders, board of trustees, et cetera, on events that they were coming in for. So trying to just get my hands in everything to continue to grow kind of my position to be able to advocate with some power or prestige, right? You can advocate from the bottom, the middle, or the top, for certain changes. So that was where I wanted to be.
So are we still on that track, or do we pivot because of some other reason?
Yeah. No, you're so discerning and I appreciate it. So yes, my life pivoted in some ways towards the end of my dissertation PhD process. I was leaning towards maybe doing some type of consulting in college athletics, maybe not necessarily going through the normal path towards becoming a Division I AD. And I ended up getting engaged to my husband. That moved us down to Bradenton, Florida. That's where we're currently located. And he was hired on, you might from a high school perspective be familiar with IMG Academy and the Gatorade Sports Science Institute is a partner organization on campus. So he's a scientist down there, which moved us, right? And there's not many locations here that have college athletics unless you go up to USF at different levels. And it was just a perfect time for me to transition kind of into one of those more consulting L&D type roles. So,
yeah, well, I think I'm thankful that you pivoted because, as I see here, your mission is, it probably has always been, but you've defined it most recently as helping professionals and teams identify their own strengths to lead well and grow their impact. And so it's clear you're on fire for that. Can you tell me a little bit about how you developed that and expand on what that vision is all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the role that I stepped into following that transition, I was able to support a boutique professional development training firm with global impact and going into organizations to help meet those needs of building authentic connection and helping them be lifted in many ways through experiential laughter, filled experiences, through kind of a strategic consulting support role, as well as custom like instructional design development in some regards. So for me with that, I had the ability to lean in and do training as well as curriculum development around workplace well-being, right? What does that look like? How can we go in and make sure that we're taking time for pause? We're placing effective boundaries around us so that we can be our best selves and show up in those environments. So that kind of gave me the space to develop those areas I was passionate about growing in. And then of course you couple in building an inclusive workspace with that. And all those things together help me better meet the need on a person-to-person basis, but also from, seeing the broad vision What is the goal of the organization? What are their genuine outcomes? Do they even know? How can we help them get there? So all those muscles were built kind of through that previous experience I had.
Well, you hit on, I've been traveling a lot more lately since I've got my third vaccination and my doctor cleared me. I've been talking to a lot of different superintendents in different states across the United States, and they all seem to say one thing is that they're worried about the retention of their staff and leaders. So their teachers and leaders. They're worried about their ability to find new folks. They're worried about the culture overall, right? So when you talk about workplace well-being, where do we start? Like, what are the things that you're looking for to help diagnose what we need, where we take our first steps to make the culture of our schools and districts into a place that people want to be and, stay for a long, long time?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a layered question, right? For sure, because you really have to get into to explore the genuine need based on the situation, the circumstances, what those leaders are doing day to day. But from a broader perspective, what we're looking for is creating environments of trust where team members are able to voice courageously their thoughts, feedbacks, opinions, able to have the tools and the space to say, hey, you know what? Today, I'm going to be off a Zoom camera. Or, hey, you know what? Tomorrow I actually have to take off a few hours early to pick up my kid from school, right? Like, that is an environment where they know that whatever leader is supporting them is going to advocate for their needs as well. And I think the reality is that before the pandemic, we weren't operating in systems where that was acknowledged, to be just totally frank, in most workspaces. It was assumed that the leader sets the standard and you rise to that expectation. And I think there's a shift that's happening that we're all experiencing, is that employees are in many ways shifting the conversation to be, well, we have a voice, we have a choice as well. So how can we get one another on the same page to really do what's best for the broader organization? So
what recommendations or suggestions do you have? Because I'm picturing, let's say we have a school leader, right? So their principal, and they've got this vision that you're talking about, but the district may not be there yet. But they know they've got to create this culture within their school so they don't lose their folks. Yeah. What's your encouragement for those folks or any other like middle management? I mean, they're full leaders, but they feel kind of stuck in the organization. What's your encouragement or suggestions for them to kind of go do the right thing for their culture?
Yeah, I mean, I think first is getting feedback from those that are in existence, that are currently leading in the organization, letting them know that they're not only are they going to hear them, but they're going to strive to apply and advocate for what they're sharing. And then I think it's starting to put some things they're hearing into action in like micro learning aspects. So being able to, decipher everything that we've learned. Does that mean that we're going to do a, 2-hour brainstorming on this subject to help define it more succinctly? Does it mean that I do need to give like a practical need, like a certain, rolling window where they're able to have time and space to do what they personally need? I'm sensitive to saying absolutes because I know the nature of teachers, right, is that they only have so many time, there's always more they can give. But I just think that acknowledgement and advocacy is the practice that's necessary. And I do think that they need to see the fruit of that action. So we need to put in some type of quick win, whether that's in the next month, we're going to do this, where people feel like their cup is starting to be poured into, bringing in an external consultant to support, providing additional resources, even if it means advocating with some like key sponsor stakeholder to try to bring in, something that's necessary if the funding doesn't already exist. I think seeing those efforts will help in terms of that acknowledgement, like, okay, they're not going to just let us sit here and feel like, or just, burn out and leave, which like you said, is happening across the board.
Well, what's your advice for someone who, let's say a teacher's listening, they may feel like they don't want to leave. They're not trying to get out, but they're burned out. They're at their rope. Like what are strategies that they can access for kind of self-wellness
Yeah.
to really get through this?
Yeah. I mean, I think morning and evening routine are key, and that's something that's tangible for all of us, whatever morning means to you, depending on that timeline. And it can be super simple. So something that we kind of are able to tap into, if that's like a walk around the neighborhood, drinking your, morning beverage, and making sure that you take 10 to 15 minutes to read something that pours into you before going and serving and doing. Some people have more expansive routines depending on the time they have, but keeping those things simple in the morning, and then also in the evening, having some time to separate what you experienced from the day with the wind down and what's happening next. I think I can speak for most of us where we often just grab straight for our phones as a way to decompress, to be honest, after a stressful workday, because in our minds, it's mindless work, and it makes us feel validated in different ways than what we experience in the workspace. But because of the blue light, because of our brain and the background constantly moving with that type of resource, it's important that we disconnect from electronics for some time in the evening and just be present, whatever that looks like for us. If that's listening to music we enjoy, or again, doing a workout, making a nutrient dense dinner that really helps pour into whatever you've been experiencing. All of those things help us wind down so that we can improve our sleep habits, right? Which in essence, I always like to say that your workday starts at least, 24 hours before, but definitely the evening before. So if you're not planning for the day ahead and mindful of what you're doing that evening before the workday, your workday is going to be affected. So
that's great. I've asked this question a bunch, and I've not had anyone throw in there a nutrient dense meal. And so is that a passion of yours, or is that something that you've stuck by in terms of the importance of nutrition to self-care?
absolutely. Absolutely. I think there are so many things that we think we can just self-care away, right? Like just have a bubble bath and I'm going to feel better. But the reality is that if we're trying to sustain our energy levels and our ability to show up as our full selves for the long run, we have to be cognizant of what we're putting into our bodies throughout the day. I don't like to necessarily specify what someone should have and when, because we're all different in that process. But depending on your goals, right, that might look like making sure you do eat something in the morning at some interval. I know most people think that coffee is going to sustain them. The reality is that coffee doesn't really have enough calories alone to actually give us the full energy that we need throughout the day. And then, yes, winding down, making sure that we're pouring back into our bodies what we may have exerted throughout that day.
That's great. I didn't know we would go down that path. When you were saying all the things you could do, I was like, wow, that was very specific. I have to assume that it's a passion of yours as well, or you
Absolutely.
research and everything else. So my question for you, what habits do you have that you put into play that you think lead to your success on a day in and day out basis?
Yeah. I've spoke to several of them, and I'll kind of share it in step-by-step form. So yeah, in the morning, I go for a walk around the neighborhood. Since I'm in a work from home role right now, it really helps me to get just out and about and active. Sometimes I'll fill that time instead with a workout, but I've learned about myself is that just like we like to under promise and over deliver with our clients, I don't want to set unrealistic expectations and then become discouraged with what I'm striving to do. So my goal is 2 to 3 workouts a week. And if I'm able to get more in, great. But I'll let myself do those in the days that I need to. I come back in and I get a good stretch in. And then I normally will take 10, 15 minutes out to just read something that, fills me and is edifying. And then I do have a nutrient dense breakfast. So I'm an oatmeal gal. I have loaded oatmeal. So I have my classic oatmeal, 100% like cacao, dark chocolate, pumpkin seeds, hemp seeds, and berries and kind of mix all those in together. And that's been my breakfast probably for the past at least 5 months. So when you talk about habits and routines, do I mix in and have like eggs and something and things on days? Absolutely. But that's kind of my core, and then get into the day. So
that's awesome. Any secrets to how you wind down?
yes. I really enjoy, no electronics. We try to do, if we're really trying to be, my husband and I really try to be focused, we'll do no phone after 9, but the reality is that that's not always feasible. And sometimes you want to write notes in your phone, et cetera, but I do make sure that I don't necessarily sleep with my phone next to me. I try to leave it on the dresser in the bathroom or somewhere away so that I won't wake up and grab it and be looking at it. I also do a magnesium, going to nutrients, like I do kind of like a tonic, if you will, like a Wellbeing tonic of just magnesium and kombucha and a few other things, ACV, that have genuinely helped me kind of decompress and slow down in the evening. And then being present without electronics, don't have like a TV, in the bedroom, all those types of things, to just be focused as a wind down. So.
Yeah, I think AJ, I think you're about your email or direct message about to blow up with. So what's that tonic again, and how do I get that? I didn't mean to go down that path, but it's fascinating to me because I think, like you said, you said something earlier of your work day starts 12 to 24 hours before the next day.
Yep.
And so just constantly being in that Q2 state of being ahead is really key.
Exactly.
It's tough. So I guess my question for you is, what do you say to those folks who just feel like they're in the cycle, right? They may have they're in that phase of life where everything's coming at them. They're like, yeah, I would love to be that far ahead, but I'm barely surviving today. And so I just want to watch Netflix and I'll catch my breath and I'll be ready for the next day.
Yeah. I mean, I would bring their goals to mind, right? Where do you want to be? What do you want to do ultimately? One thing that is a consistent practice for me is setting annual and then quarterly goals for my personal life in different categories. So faith, fitness, finances, firm, which is like passion projects, those types of things. Like, what are 1 or 2 things that I can improve in those areas? And then think about the practicality of walking that out, because there's no condemnation for someone and what you're referencing, right? If you want to binge in that moment, but think about how much is binging consistently helping me get to where I want to go, or is it just feeding this emotion of lacking a certain level of validation in certain regards and not getting where I want to go to? Is that where I want to be? Do I want to have this feeling? And some people might say yes, and that's great, but I think a lot of us would say, no, that's actually not where I want to be in the long term. I want to feel different. And if that's your answer, then I would encourage the evaluation of, where do I want to be? And then let me simplify, what's one thing I can do tomorrow, in that case, if it's the night before, to get me closer to that goal. Just one thing, and it could be added or taking something away. I think we always think that we have to take something away, like you have to take away Netflix, but maybe it's not watching Netflix, but taking away just a little piece of it, and that you're not going to do it for as long, right? You're going to shut it down by a certain time, but you still get it. Yeah. But then over time, you're like, do I really need this? What am I going to fill that time with that actually helps me towards that goal that I have? So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not trying to demonize Netflix, because I've enjoyed plenty of things on there. I think the point is that anything can be a good thing, can be abused to distract you from 100%. The other parts of your life. So yeah, that's why I focus on that. What are some of your favorite books that you've read, or most impactful books that you read, or what's your kind of reading routine? What things do you read right now that are inspiring you?
Yeah, one book that has really helped me when we talked about the perfectionism and boundary setting and all of those things is a book by Nedra. I believe, I don't want to say her last name, but it is Set Boundaries, Sound Peace. set boundaries, find peace. And I actually put a note here so I could remember. It's Nedra Glover Tawwab, is her last name. And she is a licensed counselor, therapist, and supports in helping to reframe what it looks like to make sure that we are standing courageous in our needs, and also what might be the root of why we don't advocate for our own needs, and how we can continue to grow in that skill set. Of course, as you could probably note with what I'm speaking to, James Clear, Atomic Habits, I was an early adopter back in, I think, 2008, like right when he started his blog. I was like all in, on the listserv, and all those things. So love everything that he shared. Angela Duckworth and Grit. When I'm speaking to anything that I speak to, I always like to have a deeper research understanding in, knowing that those are the thought leaders in the space, of what I'm sharing. So those are kind of three that have been really impactful to me personally, but there's, a wealth of others. So
I know two of them well, so I'll have to look into the other one. Another thing I'm just interested in, I think music is a soundtrack to everyone's life. So I'm just curious, on a playlist right now that you can think of, what artists do you have on your playlist?
Yeah. So Jonathan Ogden is kind of like a up and coming artist that does like kind of hip hop / R&B / lo-fi. And I like his music, and I can just listen to it in the background, and it's refreshing. I was always a huge Norah Jones fan. I used to listen to Norah Jones before my meets instead of pump up music, because in gymnastics, you have to like be calm and focused and all those types of things. So I love his stuff. Anything 80s, 90s, R&B, always, have those on repeat. And then for like pump up workout music, like Andy Mineo or some other CHH artists are often on my playlist. So
like KB, a couple other ones, Chris Holvey. Anyways,
yeah.
I'll go down that path. You said 80s and 90s R&B. I was joking this weekend at a reunion that in college, for this inauguration event I was a part of, I got way too much say in the artists we got. And so I brought 112 to campus and was like super pumped. I got to play basketball with them afterwards. It was like amazing.
That's awesome.
I don't know if everyone at the school I went to was as diehard of a fan as me, but I was thinking, would 112 fit your playlist?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I definitely think they would fit in somewhere.
I was just thinking, oh man, I've thought about them forever, but I got in a conversation. Anyways, I digress. Lauren, you can take that out if you need to. All right, before we let you go, I'm just always curious. I mean, you're someone who's reading a lot, surrounded by a lot of really influential and amazing people. What's the best advice that you have for leaders right now that you've just heard recently that's on your heart you want to share with them?
Yeah. I mean, we spoke to it in this present moment. I think it's keeping the vision, the end picture in mind while still filling your own cup, and that you have permission. You don't need permission to do it. You don't need permission to do something for you, because I think we're often waiting for someone to be like, yes, green light, go for it. Sometimes you might have to fight to make time, fight to shift what's in your environment to make space for those moments, but it's worth it. So I would just encourage anyone to not become discouraged in what they're doing. If you're passionate about the occupation and the space that you're in, know that over time, with your diligence, you will continue to see those breath moments, those moments of lightness, that ability to, if you will, see the fruit of what you're doing in those areas. So just know that you're not alone. All of us are experiencing this, but we can each reframe our approach to make sure that we're doing what is best for ourselves, but also those within our sphere of influence. So
that's great. So Dr. Lee, AJ, whatever we're going to go by, again, you're so easy to talk to, so it's hard to just look at you and be like, Dr. Lee, even though you're definitely deserving of the title. What's the best way for people who are listening right now and want to learn more about you? What's the best way for them to learn more about you and how you're trying to influence them?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I am on the gram. So if someone wants to go at Dr. AJ Lee on Instagram, and I would say that's probably the best place, or, just write in the comments and we can, I can send an email your way to stay connected. I have the privilege, of course, of working currently in a space where I'm able to support learning for Franklin Covey. So would love to just stay connected in any way that I can.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you so much. It was definitely uplifting. And if any word describes you, authentic is the first one that would come to mind. So thank you for bringing your head and heart to this conversation. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Dustin and team. You guys have a great day.
All right. Thanks, AJ. Appreciate you. Please support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, podcast on Apple or Spotify, and help us celebrate the beautiful, messy work of shaping human potential.